coming up on Wrestling Life.
He's a guy that could have the entire locker room laughing. You know, he was just, you would see this mean monster on television, that persona. But to have him in the locker room and being able to travel with him, I don't think, I know we never had a crossword. Just a great person, man. I love my time. I cherish the time that I was around him. Again, and he made me laugh, even if I was in a bad mood, because I was the grumpy one. Full disclosure, I was the grumpy one of KroniK. And he always made me smile, always made me laugh.
This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that celebrates wrestling's past, present, and future with real talk from real talent.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to another very special Gone Too Soon episode of Wrestling Life with me, Ben Veal. And today I'm joined by not one, but two fantastic guests and co-hosts on this show. We have got, joining me as always, the people's broker, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, Mr. Ash Ajaz. Ash, how are you?
Great to be here, as always, Ben, sharing the screen with the hardest working sports journalist of 2025. Great to be here.
Thank you. That's suitably niche. I like that. And then joining us,
it's the truth.
Joining us all the way from across the pond, it is, of course, a good friend of the show, good friend of mine, Mr. Bryan Clark. How are you, sir?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And before we dive into anything on this Gone Too Soon episode, I first have to say, the meltdown. You and Tom Finkill, you are absolutely killing it, my friend, with that show. How are you finding the world of podcasting?
So far, really enjoying it. Tom has been a blessing, man. He really, we have our specialties, you know, as far as it's between the booking, the show running, getting the talent set up, the creative, the ideas that we share together. It's working out really well. But that's the key thing, is it is a ton of work, as you know. But so far I am really, we're up to episode 15 and it's been fun every time.
Yeah, you can tell you two are having fun. It's a ton of work, but it's a ton of fun. And we're going to have some fun today because whilst the topic is obviously very somber and sad, the reason we wanted to invite you on here is to share memories and have some fun looking back on the life and the legacy of a very dear friend of yours. Of course, we're here today to talk about the one and only legendary Crush, Mr. Bryan Adams. And I want to kick off, really. We're going to look at some chronological stuff. We're going to look through his career. We're going to look at key moments. But I really want to hand the floor over to you, sir, first, and talk about actually describe Bryan to us. And, you know, we all know, you know, we know Crush as a character. We know what we saw, this powerhouse on television, whether it was Kona Crush or dastardly bad guy Crush with Mr. Fuji, or it was obviously your partner in KroniK. But what was Bryan like away from the wrestling ring?
Well, for me personally, we got to be really good friends in WCW. And all the times that I was with Bryan, he's a guy that could have the entire locker room laughing. You know, he was just, you would see this mean monster on television, that persona of Bryan. But to have him in the locker room and being able to travel with him, I don't think, I know we never had a crossword in our entire time together. We may have disagreed, but we never raised our voices to each other. Just a great person, man. I love my time. I cherish the time that I was around him. Again, and he made me laugh, even if I was in a bad mood, because I was the grumpy one. Full disclosure, I was the grumpy one of KroniK. And he always made me smile, always made me laugh.
And did you two have, because obviously you're two big guys, you're both called Bryan. Did you call each other Bryan, or did you have nicknames for one another?
Yeah, it was BA for him and BC. BA and BC. We would do it actually in interviews at times, but yeah, that was it.
I love it. So look, just kind of going back to life before wrestling. So Bryan is born in Kona, Hawaii. Of course, he will go on to be Kona Crush in the WWF, but he's born in Kona, Hawaii in April 1964. And after graduating high school, obviously I know that military service is a very dear and important part of your life. Joins the US Air Force, and it's there that he begins boxing. So did the two of you talk about his military time and what that did for his life?
Oh, yes, we did. We both very proudly served in the military. Bryan spent a lot of time in Japan, and Bryan's job in the military was he worked on loading the C-130 huge cargo airships or airplanes, excuse me. And so he did that. And I worked on the security forces, military police side. So we would talk about all the training and the different things that we had went through during our military time. But yeah, we were both very, very proud veterans. Like I said, he was born in April. I was born in March of 64, same age, both 6'6", both 290 plus, Bryan. It just, it was meant to be.
It really is, Ash, isn't it? It's like the twin brothers from other mothers.
It's absolutely amazing. And now I'm thinking back, now learning this fact, they could have done something with them two when Doink was trying to, fool Crush. So Crush could have had, the second Crush, and then they could have done something like that. That would have been so amazing, wouldn't it?
Well, that's a valid point. I mean, we're jumping ahead, but were there ever talks about putting Adam Bomb and Crush together in some way in the WWF?
Never. They never even thought about it. It would have been something to put us together as a team, but I never really felt like they had real big value on tag teams in WWF/WWE. It didn't seem like it. And even now, at times, it just seems like they'll just put two guys together with not a lot of thought behind it. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It just varies. The chemistry is the biggest thing. And that's the one thing I don't want to jump too far ahead, but with Bryan and I, we had chemistry from the very first night. So that's huge.
Let's jump to it. When did you guys first meet?
Oh, well, of course we met in WWF, but what I was referring to as us as a team. Yeah. We were always friends, but we would become so much bigger and better friends in WCW because we were together 24/7. We were on the road basically. We were still friends in WWF, but we just really didn't travel together very much. But our first night together when we were teamed up, the chemistry was there the first night.
And I think what a lot of fans might not realize with Crush, because again, Bryan is someone who, as I've said to you before, I don't think he's really got his flowers in the world of wrestling. Obviously, passing away at such a young age as well means a lot of fans of a certain era have missed his body of work. But, trained by Antonio Inoki. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I don't think a lot of people realize that actually he got his pedigree and his start in Japan. Obviously, you two would go back to Japan and kind of finish out your career over there. But, he was exposed from a kind of very early and formative age in his wrestling days to kind of that Japanese strong style, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in the same dojo class with Chris Benoit. And I know there were a few other guys, but he was one that I can remember him talking about at least. I'm sure there were others that were notables that would be, would go on to bigger careers. But Bryan, he worked the Japan style and was trained there initially until he would come back stateside and he would work his way over to Portland.
Okay.
In that territory. Yeah. So he spent, I don't know how many years he was in Portland, but he really got himself established there. I think he became the Pacific Northwest champion, if I'm not mistaken.
And that's when he was the American Ninja.
Exactly.
Yeah.
American Ninja.
Yeah. So he always, when we discussed it, he always had fond memories of Portland. So he did like it there. Again, but when you get the call to go to the big leagues, of course, you're going to take it.
Yeah, and I mean, what a call he gets. I mean, obviously, I was very blessed recently, thanks to your good self, to have Demolition on the show. Obviously, we talked a fair amount about Crush during that episode. What are your first memories of Crush, Ash? Was it Demolition Crush?
So yeah, I think I remember the Demolition Crush, but I'm trying to think back now, like as a kid, to me, like the Demolition Crush was someone else, and then the other Crush with the bright gear and everything, that was like some different Crush. So I liked that. I was a huge Demolition fan as a kid. I loved their rivalries with the Hart Foundation, with the LOD, and all these. But it was the Hawaiian Crush, the bright. That was the guy that I loved. Even though I liked the Demolition and it was like a different thing for me, suddenly, okay, there's a third Demolition. What's going on here? Like, I'm just trying to think about it. For me, the real interaction, the first memories of Crush was that, and so watching those vignettes and like, when I was a kid, my mama used to tell me, so those are my memories of Crush.
And like where are you at this time, Bryan? Like, this is 1990, 1991 WWF. He's come on board. Very, very tough gig, having to essentially replace a legend in Bill Eadie for health reasons. So Crush has got to join this incredibly high-profile, historic tag team in Demolition, which is an unbelievably tough thing to have to do. Were you following the product at that time yourself?
Oh yeah, I was a huge fan. At that time, the difference our steps as far as both being in the military, finishing up our military service, I think Bryan went into the business right after that, whereas I had a full scholarship to play college football. So I went on to play college football while Bryan was, that time frame, you said about 90, 91, I was finishing up with college football and getting myself into the independents in the Atlanta area. And then in 92, I would get into Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So I was still a little behind where he was at as far as the path into the business.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, they talk about kind of strapping the proverbial rocket ship on you. But I mean, obviously, Vince McMahon can see money in Bryan Adams from day one, because his first gig is going into, one of their most marketable tandems. And then when the kind of Demolition outfit kind of quietly dissolves, he's repackaged, as I said, into how this is how I remember him first time, because obviously I'm a 1992. That was my beginning of wrestling fandom. So Kona Crush, the purple and the orange and the vice grip and everything about that, like, I absolutely loved, because of course I was 8 years old. There was a whole lot of neon, and I loved SummerSlam 1992. But did you ever talk to him about how he felt about that period of his life? Because he's brought in as in many ways quite a tough character in Demolition Crush, and then Kona Crush is such a child-friendly kind of sanitized presentation, isn't it?
Yes, I think all the conversations we had, he really enjoyed that version of the Kona Crush with the, like you said, the bright colors. Yeah. All the vignettes that they shot, building him up. At his core, that was Bryan, a Hawaiian, a big, massive, strong guy, and very funny. So, he was, even though he would portray a couple of different heel characters throughout his career, if not more than a couple, but at his core, he was a really great person, a good sweetheart of a guy.
And that was going to be one of my questions. You said, he was such a lovely guy, and we hear that about most of the people who play these heels, but then backstage we hear stories. They were the nicest of guys. And I think most of his careers, I always saw him as a heel, like whichever persona he was. What were his feelings about it? Did he enjoy playing a heel, or you think he wanted to be a babyface more?
I think he would really just do what was being asked of him, but probably I know that at times that we would go out and get a big pop as KroniK, and there were certain matches where we were just like, wow, just you could feel it. And we would look at each other in the ring while it was happening, like, or either we would talk on the phone or on the way home or in the car ride to the next town. We would discuss how it went, the feeling of getting that pop. And being a face at the time. So, yeah, I'm sure that I would definitely say that he enjoyed, especially with KroniK. I can definitely say that as KroniK. I know that he loved getting that positive reinforcement, that reaction.
Nice.
Well, we're going to spend a lot of time covering KroniK, but I want to talk a bit more about Kona Crush, because you and I have talked about this on when you came on as a guest on your own. But I'd love to dive into this a bit more. Wrestlemania 9, which Ash and I have spoken a lot about Wrestlemania 9. We both have a real sweet spot for it. I think a lot of people from our generation do, because it was the kind of quintessential cartoonish WrestleMania. There's no other way to describe it. There were elephants, there were togas, there were clowns, there were vultures. There's Giant Gonzalez, who defies description. You have Crush, you have Doink the Clown. Doink, in the early days, that evil Matt Bourne Doink was tremendous. I mean, genuinely terrified me as a child. It was such a fantastic gimmick for a few months until it obviously started to get watered down. And I think this match with Crush is really the epitome of when it turned from quite edgy to silly. Was it after the match that Crush first spoke to you about feeling uncomfortable about that gimmick with the two Doinks, or were you too close already by that point?
No, I had not arrived in the company yet.
Oh, okay.
I didn't. I wasn't there till a little bit later. But yeah, we talked about it once we teamed up later. When you're on the road for that long of a time and driving to the next town, like I said, at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever it is, you have conversations. But yeah, I know that he was not happy with that program. And especially, I know that he felt that they really just sort of used him because he really had a lot of steam going into that. And Crush was doing very well. And for him to, I think he felt that it made him look kind of foolish. He just was not happy with it.
It did feel like the wheels kind of came off the babyface run after that, because until then he had been booked very strong. Yeah. It's not really a time where there are that many strong babyfaces in the company, and obviously you're losing Hulk Hogan. Randy Savage is on the way out. You've got Crush, who's a relative he's a newcomer. He's very young. He's huge. He looks great. It's surprising that at that point you don't see the marketability of him as, at the very least, an intercontinental champion with the company. Certainly very strong kind of mid-card player at that point. And it feels like after the Doink run, the wheels start to slow down on his babyface turn. Would you say that was fair?
That sounds about right. Because a year later he was in a feud with Randy, give or take somewhere.
Yeah, it wasn't even that. I think it was very early 94. No, it was actually before. It was late 93, if my timing's right, because by early 94 he's involved in the much like your good self, he's involved in the loading Yokozuna into a casket at the Rumble. So by early 94 he's turned to the dark side. And he's got that great new presentation which I thought was fantastic. I mean, that really suited him, the kind of purple and the black, the gear. I mean, he genuinely looked like a badass. Yeah, aligned himself with Mr. Fuji. But and it was great. But when you look back on it, that Kona Crush character, which was so significant to Ash and I and a whole generation, lasted basically a year, which is nothing in wrestling.
I loved that character so much, and especially when he challenged Shawn Michaels at King of the Ring for the Intercontinental title. I had this feeling that Crush was just going to crush him. Crush is the next Intercontinental champion, but it wasn't to be. And it was just a bit sad now, even reminiscing, he never got a run with a singles title or anything like that in the WWF, even though they were missing. A lot of those big guys were gone after that 91, 92, 93 time, with the whole steroid thing and stuff like that. And he was only one of the big guys who was there. Him, maybe The Undertaker, and Razor was there. Obviously, Diesel coming in a bit later. So it could have been really great. They could have utilized him a bit more. But he was a different kind of big guy at the time. He was so agile, the way he used to enter the ring, hopping over the top rope and doing these moves. So he was very different to the other big guys. I think they could have done a bit more with him.
And what did you think, Ash, of the Kona Crush? Because I used to love doing that.
I used to love that people in the crowd, with the T-shirts and everything. I still remember that promo that he cut on Doink the Clown prior to their match, and he's holding a pineapple in his hand. He's walking on the beach, and he just crushes the pineapple, and he's talking to Doink, and I think that was pretty cool. Like, seeing that as a kid, like, whoa, he's gonna kill the clown.
That's awesome. I love that. What point? So you entered the company in 1993. Is that right, Bryan?
Yes.
How would you who was Bryan on kind of good terms with at the time? Who was he close to in the locker room when you joined the company?
Oh, I would definitely say Undertaker. I know they traveled together, and I want to say Fuji traveled with them also, but I could be wrong. But mostly probably those two traveling together. I'm sure there were others. A lot of times, during that era, sometimes you would sort of just jump in with who you could once you get to the airport, depending on what city everyone was coming from. So sometimes it always varied. I know with me personally, I sort of bounced around who I would ride with, travel with. But a lot of times for the most part, we were all on the same flight, at least an hour or so apart, at the airport together. So yeah, I would definitely say he was traveling with Taker during that time frame.
I know the BSK is an unofficial group, but it seemed like Bryan is very much a member of that. If I recall at the Undertaker's Hall of Fame speech, he brought Bryan up on the screen. I'm sure I've seen photos of them all together, including Bryan. So I think he was very much in that kind of clique, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. As far as I know. It was so funny. I was actually just got some messages from Henry Godwin this morning. So, yeah, they were. It was weird. And I say weird. I don't know if that's the right word, but even though we were all in the same locker room and stuff, you wouldn't really know that. Okay, this is the BSK guys, or this is these guys, or whatever. It's not like we all had separate buses or anything. We were on a strict budget, not making much money. We were all in this, all the same locker room. Usually at the same hotel. We were trying to save money and make money, so there wasn't a lot of separation of us.
Did you notice it with the clique, or not at all at the time?
No, I mean, yeah, we were all in the same locker room. Yes, usually the same hotel. A lot of times the same flights. It just, I
think it's interesting. People kind of with benefit of hindsight and what you hear in wrestling lore, the reality versus actually what it was like. At the time versus what we hear afterwards, thinking there's always real divisions in the company.
Yeah, because like I said, we have to work together. We have to keep it safe. We have to put food on the table. You got to take care of each other.
Yeah.
Title Run Toys Series 1. Dangerous Danny Davis. Wrath. Juventud Guerrera. Ernest the Cat Miller. And Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, coming to the ring soon.
Well, as I said, we turn heel. So he turns heel in late '93. Kind of takes on this new gimmick, aligns himself with Mr. Fuji, betrays Randy Savage on Raw. Pretty shocking for the time, to see this, and that all leads to the match that they have at WrestleMania 10. Which again, for me, is one of those matches which I just thought was like the best thing ever as a kid, because they went backstage, which that blew my mind at the time. I know they only basically went through the curtain to a little bit of rigging, but was like 5 feet away through the runway. But for me, I was like, I can't believe it. They've gone through the curtain into the other world. But you watch it back, and that WrestleMania 10 match that they had is a strange one, much like obviously the match you and Earthquake had on a show that clearly there seemed like there were a lot of moving parts. We've talked about before, your match with Earthquake was cut very, very short. I've wondered with Randy Savage and Crush's match, because it feels like the pacing's all off, and it feels like a very rushed affair and a real kind of very quick blow off to their feud. Do you know whether they had their time cut or anything changed about that match on the night?
Everything that I was hearing is that it was also cut as far as, their time that they had initially versus what they were given going through the curtain. I don't know how much time was shaved off, but there was definitely some time because like you said, it felt rushed.
Yeah.
And I think they could have done so much more with it.
It feels like there should be a lot more drama to that. You got a Falls Count Anywhere match, you've got Madison Square Garden, you've got essentially the arena, and you get that one bit backstage, which when I was younger, I thought was amazing that do you remember that Ash? He kind of gets strung up on like on a rope, upside down.
Exactly. Even like rewinding back a little bit to before turning heel, I know he was one of the people who also tried to body slam Yokozuna on the Intrepid. And I think it was kind of there that played it. I don't know if it was a real injury they had, but they said, he ended up having a back injury because of he was lifting up Yokozuna. So I don't know if it was a real injury he had. Brian, do you know about that, or was it a gimmick injury?
Probably a gimmick injury. I never heard anything about the back injury. I know what you're talking about because July 4th they had a huge.
Yes.
It was. But they just recently, over that holiday, they were showing a lot of clips about the whole. I mean, they had NFL football players, different sports figures trying to slam Yoko, and Bryan was one of those people that came out. One of them.
Yes. Yeah. And so but
I don't think it was legit injury though. No.
Okay, because I think that's what they played in the storyline that, he got hurt and Macho Man, he never checked up on me. So that's how he turned heel on the Macho Man. Typical good old you never called me when I was ill type of thing. But that WrestleMania match, I remember that as a kid, like he just ties him up, like I think he's upside down and then he just like runs back as a kid I was thinking that's really unfair. How is that fair? You tie someone up. You can't do that.
Yeah, it is. But equally, it's one of the, wrestling is all about moments. And that really is a moment that 30 years on, I still vividly remember Crush there desperately trying to get back in the ring to answer I think he's got 60 seconds. Crush now has 60 seconds to get back into the ring. And I remember that, him kind of fumbling around. But again, we are only, look at kind of, and maybe you can overanalyze this stuff as a fan, but creatively, he's only just recently turned heel. You actually haven't got many heels at the time. You've got Bryan Adams, who is a strong worker. You've got Bret Hart, who is the new world champion. It feels like he would be an ideal world title payment, if nothing else, on the house show circuit and on Raw. And I feel like with how he's booked in that match, he kind of immediately loses a lot of steam as a heel as well, because I think it's quite a foolish way to lose a match, kind of being hung upside down. So again, it feels like almost as soon as his heel turn begins, a lot of the momentum is cut off for him.
Well, yeah, sort of like the Doink thing all over again. Being, ready to make that breakthrough to the next level, and then just not being able to, them not either seeing it or not wanting it to happen, or being booked properly to make it happen. Yeah.
And this is something me and you spoke about, Ben. This is the time where there's not a lot of proper heels in the company. It seemed like everyone was a babyface at that time. So we needed those big heels, and I think definitely a missed opportunity. Imagine if Crush had beaten Macho Man, because Macho Man was like sort of on the way out. His career was kind of, going down. He wasn't really, wrestling as much, and then he became a commentator and stuff like that. So I think definitely they could have strapped the Rocket to Crush, and then he could have been that guy who could have been pushed into the main event scene and then challenging Bret, or even going for the Intercontinental title at the time. So he could have done something like that. Yeah,
and this is where you wonder about kind of, again, stories and what goes into the booking of matches and shows, because if there's ever a way for Crush to get a win over a Randy Savage, it's in a Falls Count Anywhere match, because he's got Mr. Fuji, he's got this whole heel stable behind him. There's an out for Randy Savage to lose without fully putting him over clean. I don't know whether that factored in, but we've glossed over a little bit Survivor Series a few months earlier. So he's part of this kind of foreign fanatics team. So it's him, Ludwig Borger, Kubaka Jacques, and Yokozuna in Survivor Series. So he's getting that kind of main event push, and it just feels like it's immediately just stopped out of nowhere really with WrestleMania. I mean, obviously by proximity to Yokozuna, we do still get some kind of championship rub for Crush. So going into King of the Ring, they have a tag match against the Head Shrinkers. So he is in the mix, but again, not winning gold. So it's 2 years into the WWF now, and hasn't become a champion. And it just feels like by kind of mid 1994, by the time he's kind of feuding with Lex Luger, who is kind of treading water a little bit directionlessly by this point, feels a bit like they've just kind of lost their way with Crush. He's working kind of non-televised house show matches with The Undertaker, kind of doing all the European tours of The Undertaker, but just kind of, not there, but not a big player. And it's strange because this is a time when the WWF is kind of lacking in big players.
Well, and it's, it happens to a lot of guys. Unfortunately, they, it just depends. It seems like if you do not get the right reaction that you need right out of the gate, or there are other plans that we don't always know about. They're bringing someone else in. I never, you mentioned his name, Ludwig Borga. I never understood his push other than the fact that he was a foreigner. He never was really over. His work was not that good. And I think he'd worked in Japan, maybe. He definitely worked in Japan, but I don't know anywhere else. But he was brought in up almost at a top level.
Yeah.
So it's just hard to figure out what they're listening to. And when I say what they're listening to, I mean either agents, whoever's part of the booking committee, creative. There's so many variables that can work for you or against you.
Yeah, and both of you at the same time are essentially living kind of parallel creative lives, aren't you? You're both kind of creatively drifting with Vince McMahon and the team not really having anything that solid for you, when both of you should be far higher within the WWF hierarchy, ideally on television. And I know you've spoken to me about your frustrations with that, but you obviously looked to WCW as your where you'd go from WWF, but Crush does hang around for longer. I mean, the most notable thing he does really is at the 95 Royal Rumble. He's one of the few competitors beyond Shawn Michaels and a British Bulldog who actually looked like a credible threat in that match, in what is really the most throwaway Royal Rumble match of all time. He gets 4 eliminations in, including against some guy called Adam Bomb. And he's one of the final 4. So, he's there alongside Luger and Michaels and the Bulldog. So in early 95, this is the same kind of Royal Rumble, which does have some of the strangest competitors I've ever seen in a Royal Rumble match. It's feels like it's really padded out, but he is positioned as one of the potential winners of that match, which you would have thought would conceivably be the start of a push, especially as WWF is kind of in a real kind of creative quagmire, I guess, in 1995, not in a good place. Yeah. I don't know whether there would have been more for him, but in March, whilst he's at home in Hawaii, he's arrested, and the notes I have here, he's arrested and jailed for purchasing steroids and possessing an illegal handgun, and terminated from the WWF in March 1995. Were you still with the company at that time?
I think so. Yeah. I'm trying to remember when I left. I may have left maybe in June. I can't remember exactly the month I left. I think I was still there when that happened. But yeah, I did not see Bryan again until, later in both of our careers. I don't know a whole lot about that situation other than what you're reading now. I'd heard and read the same thing. I'd heard it before, but we didn't really talk a lot about that, honestly.
I wonder if he ever talked about, because obviously he does spend a period in jail, which is a significant experience to go for. Did he ever talk to you about how that changed him, or?
No, and I didn't bring it up, and he didn't really open up about it. So yeah, we never really touched on that.
No, well, in of course, you can't let anything in wrestling happen in real life without turning it into a gimmick. So of course, when he comes back, he's been to jail.
Right.
he's now a biker complete with prison tats. So this is the third iteration of Crush in 4 years. 4 iterations of Crush since 1991. So he's retained the name, but 4 very different looks for Crush. He comes back in mid-July. I thought this was an awesome look for him. He's got kind of the dreads and this kind of stonewashed grey denim thing, and he's got this tattoo on his face. And the fans are chanting jailbird at him, very kind of classic of that time. But he's got Clarence Mason, the attorney, as his manager, who for a period of time was kind of managing the Bulldog and Owen Hart, and he had this little stable himself. And he's using the Heart Punch as his finisher. So he's moved away from the Crush to the Heart Punch. Obviously, I've spoken at length with Mark Mero about the match at the Survivor Series. That Crush was a part of, that match being significant because that is the debut of The Rock, and Crush is there going toe to toe with The Rock and putting him over as the big new star of the company. But what's really significant for Crush is when he joins the Nation of Domination in early '97, because the company has changed so much in such a short space of time. Obviously, you're there in WCW. The New World Order and the presentation of the NWO has completely changed the business. And by 1997, we've got, a kind of a rival faction in the Nation of Domination, this very politically and racially charged group. And it's a big step change from where he was just a couple of years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, especially if you think about the Kona Crush version in Wrestlemania, and then just a couple of years later, he's in the Nation. So yeah, it's a huge change. But Bryan was the type of guy that could, he could make things work, and I think each part of his career, he just took the challenge and was able to make it work every time. So hey, it always helps in action figures, right? He's recently signed a new deal, his family, with WWE merchandising. So I'm happy for him. I think that's a great thing. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember. Sorry, I remember that re-debut. So it was like built as, Clarence Mason has this surprise wrestler coming with him and stuff, and we're like, okay, who is it? And Crush comes out. So I remember this when Crush comes out, I didn't recognize him. He looked so different to me. But what really annoyed me is Vince, like instantly as he comes out, Vince, that's Crush. I'm like, at least he could have at least sell it a bit more. Like, who is that? We don't know. And then maybe he comes closer. That's gotta be Crush. So I'm like, come on, Vince, at least sell it a little bit. You just outed the guy instantly as he walked across the curtain and stuff. So I remember that bit.
But I guess there's also it's a sign of the times about how much the audience had changed, as in, it's been about 18 months since he's last been on air. Yeah. But you've almost, I guess, to give Vince his credit, and Vince McMahon was never a master of subtlety, but you've got to kind of immediately ram it down the audience's throat that this is a star, and this is a star that we know. But you're right. I mean, there's no similarity between the two, and a little bit of some vignettes or something to kind of reintroduce him would have probably been much more effective, but actually to remind fans of who he was and then how Prisoner changed him feels like it would have been a better reintroduction.
Yeah, I like that. I like that spin on it, Ben. I think that's that would have been, some vignettes would have been a good idea.
We could have had some vignettes of him in a jail cell with nails.
I don't know if that would have worked, but yeah, they definitely could have done some stuff to build it up.
So I mean, he's not actually in the Nation of Domination for that long. It's about 7 or 8 months, I think, all told, because that nation goes through quite a lot of changes, and we get through to kind of King of the Ring 97, and Crush is kind of involved in arguments during the Farouk WWF title match that he has, that he doesn't win, and Crush is blamed for the loss, and the next night he's given the boot. So for the first time in 4 years, Crush is back being a babyface. But this is very far removed from Kona Crush and colourful babyfaces, because we are now well and truly on the cusp of the Attitude Era. So a babyface Crush is the leader of the Disciples of the Apocalypse. And I absolutely loved DOA. They debut in June on Raw is Raw. Now, how much of a biker was Bryan in real life?
Not a whole lot, I don't think. He may have had. I mean, I know I had a bike one time in my lifetime, and I was like, okay, never again. It's too dangerous. I don't really remember him talking about having a bike. He probably did. I just do not remember him. He was not a bike talk guy, at least when we were together. He didn't really. I know he didn't have one when we were together. As far as later in our career, I don't remember him bringing it up. But hey,
where that kind of comes from, that kind of gang. Yeah, I guess it's just big guys. There's Bryan Lee there. It's just big guys making bikers.
It was like one of the first times I think I saw someone coming to the ring like on a bike or something of that nature. I feel Undertaker probably got some hints from that perhaps when he redeveloped his character. But I think that was really, really cool seeing the DOA coming down the ramp, all the bikes circling the ring and things like that. I thought that was a really cool sight.
And it was a really cool, these three factions. I mean, it's easy to forget this because of everything that happened at Survivor Series 97, but that whole pay-per-view was built around gang rules, and it was very much kind of doubling down on DOA and Los Boricuas and the Nation of Domination. It actually didn't last that long. That whole run was about 6 months with those three factions, but they were so significant and they were such a big part of Raw is War programming and that transition to the Attitude Era. I think it's overlooked how important that was. I read in my notes that after Montreal Screwjob, Bryan was one of the few people who temporarily walked away from the company. He was so in protest over obviously what had happened between Vince and Bret. Did you ever talk to Bryan about that?
I'm sure we touched upon it, during our travel time together. I know that he definitely did not approve of what happened and what went down in Montreal. And I think so much so that he left the company. I don't know if he left permanently after that show or there was a little bit of downtime in between. I can't remember. He had
a few more matches. So I was checking this earlier before we spoke. He had a few matches. He had a match against Kane. His last match was a winning effort for the DOA on Shotgun Saturday Night, but it's the end of November 97 because it's only 3 months later that he joins you in WCW, making his debut by attacking none other than Bret Hart.
So he must have had the 90-day no-compete and then shows up, right?
Yeah, and it feels like not many people honoured that 90-day non-compete during that era, so I don't know how much it was enforced because it seemed like people would... Rick Rude certainly didn't follow that, whatever his contract was. But I was just going to say, I don't even think that is... It really shouldn't even be legal. That's like saying, okay, Ben, we're going to, you're going to cancel your show. You're not allowed to start a new show until 90 days. So what are you supposed to do during those 90 days?
Gardening leave.
Yeah.
I remember his debut in WCW when he shows up and he's trying to convince Bret that he's there for Bret and to protect Bret. And then within, I think, 5 minutes, then he just turns on Bret and he aligns with the NWO. So, that was pretty cool. Like to see Crush in WCW.
Yeah, and I'm guessing those two guys. I mean, the fact that he's so upset about what's happened in Montreal, the fact that Bret's his introduction. I'm guessing those two had a really good relationship. Is that fair to say?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I remember. Bret loved going to Hawaii and, Bryan would always give him the connections as far as, the best places to stay. And he would always talk to Bryan about, what cities he would be in. And Bryan would always hook him up. And, I think Bret even had a condo in Hawaii. He loved it so much. And I know that even after we retired, I know that Bret would go to Hawaii. And I think he actually was on one of Bryan's shows in I don't know if it was, I'm not sure the city, but it was definitely maybe in Kona, maybe. But yeah, they were also really good friends, even post wrestling. Yeah.
They went through a lot together, really, didn't they, in both companies?
Yeah.
So when is it kind of after Bryan's, I assume you're happy to see your old friend now joining you in WCW. At what point do you two start to kind of really spend more time together?
Well, in the locker room, once he came back, we were always talking and chatting it up. Bryan was a big card player. He loved to play cards, so that was a big thing. Big Show would always be playing cards, and they'd just going at it, like, really funny stuff too, because Bryan was really good. So when they would lose to Bryan, they'd really get pissed off about it. so yeah, Bryan enjoyed the cards and stuff, and but we once we got paired up together, really just like I say, the chemistry was always there. It was just never had a chance to be on screen together.
Yeah.
And then once that happened, it was automatic.
I'm Mark Merrill, former WWE Intercontinental Wrestling Champion and 3-time WCW World Television Champion. I am thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Bad to Good. The inspiring story of a wrestling wild man chronicles the highs and lows of my life, both in and out of the wrestling ring. It's a powerful narrative of overcoming adversity and the importance of perseverance, no matter how tough the journey gets. Co-authored with my good friend and award-winning journalist, Ben Veal, this is a story I've long wanted to share, and I truly hope it inspires you. I hold nothing back in this book, revealing the untold truths of my extraordinary life, from my modest beginnings and my first boxing match to the struggles with addiction that almost consumed me and my evolution into the charismatic Johnny B. Bad. This book offers an insider's perspective on the world of professional wrestling and my journey as a sports entertainer. You'll read about my pivotal negotiations with Vince McMahon that led to the first ever guaranteed contract in the WWF and how that decision marked me within the locker room. I discuss the impact of my relationship with my then wife, Rena, known to fans as Sable, on my career. I also confront the darkest moments of my life, how I hit rock bottom and how that experience sparked my rebirth, leading me to become America's leading motivational school speaker, inspiring young people and transforming lives. Featuring forwards by my good friends Diamond Dallas Page and Lex Luger, along with contributions from Mick Foley, Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo, and others who shared this wild journey with me. Bad to Good is a story you don't want to miss. Head to Amazon.com or WrestlingLife.online now to pick up your copy.
And that's where I want to really focus time on. I mean, that kind of year and a half of kind of crush in WCW before we get to KroniK is right. Like so much of WCW booking at that time. There's not really much kind of rhyme or reason or structure to it. He's a member of the NWO, but by this point, who isn't a member of the NWO? He jumps around, he's part of the NWO Hollywood faction, which is a split off of the NWO Black and White faction. He is at least, and this is a big step from where he was in the WWF, he is at least sharing a ring against top tier talent. So his Slamboree debut is against Lex Luger. He gets a world heavyweight title shot against Goldberg in July, which is a huge deal with where Goldberg is at that time. He's battling Steve McMichael at Road Wild. He beats Eddie Guerrero on Nitro. So he is getting more of a rub, but the problem is with WCW at the time, so much is happening and there's so many moving parts that it's not so much wins and losses are meaningless, but there's not really a great story arc to it. Whether he beats someone or loses to someone, he's just kind of there in the NWA, like so many guys were, like Scott Norton was at the time, or a lot of the big guys. They're just there to kind of bolster this giant group. He gets put into the NWA Black and White, which is kind of the spin-off after you've had the NWA Wolfpack. There's all these different kind of combinations. But the bit which I had totally glossed over when I was preparing for this to get ready to speak to you today is this whole demon thing, because I had no realization that the demon was Bryan Adams, or he got packaged with any of that. So tell me about that.
Well, I don't know if you know this either, but I'll go ahead and give you a scoop bit. They pitched that to me also.
Oh, did they?
Yes. They pitched the demon to me also, and to Bryan, and I turned it down. I said, I'm not the guy for that. I don't think I could probably pull it off, but I just really put the brakes on that one. And I know that Bryan did it for a couple of times maybe, but Bryan realized, as I would, realize, when they found Dale Torborg. Dale was the perfect guy for that.
Yeah.
A massive Kiss fan, 6'6", athletic, great looking guy. I mean, he could do it all. So Dale was a great athlete and a great human being. I love Dale. And I just want to say that, that was the right fit. So that was the right thing for Bryan to do, was to get out of that gimmick and let Dale take it over, because he was the right guy for that. But yeah, we actually both were offered that character. So,
wow. How different life could have been. Think of a toy deals.
Yeah. It was, I think that was one of those things where Kiss really had all the control as far as that merchandising, royalties, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, this was Eric was planning on doing a big New Year's Eve Kiss party, wasn't he? Like, to see. I think the idea was it was supposed to be like a WCW pay-per-view that led into a Kiss concert at the turn of the millennium. I think that was a big idea that was pitched by Eric, is what I've read over the years. They have this big kind of blow-off thing that you'd see in the new millennium with WCW followed by Kiss.
Could be. I don't really know on that one.
No,
I don't doubt it. It's a possibility.
It would have made money.
Yeah. Well.
So spring 2000. That's what we really wanted to get to. Is, of course, when he's teamed up with you and you formed KroniK. So you've talked to me before about the name KroniK came about because in a WCW magazine they actually asked people to vote for the name, and KroniK was selected. How did you feel when you first heard KroniK?
Well, we had talked about ideas and how to come up with a name. We knew what the slang meaning was, of course, and but we thought, okay, when it was pitched to us, I think, like I said, from a fan poll of the magazine, they spelled it like C, KroniK. And so we were like, okay, why don't we use like the band Korn and put it with a K and put another K on the end to make it so when we came out, the letters would be spinning in green to be KroniK, KRONIK. So that's how it all sort of came about. But we would just use it, even though it was a cool name at the time. We would take the different meaning of it, like as in chronic beating, chronic pains, chronic destruction, instead of the smoke KroniK.
Yeah.
So that's how we were able to use it. And so we thought, hey, this is a pretty cool name. And of course, we would use our real names, Bryan Clark, Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, as a pair, what a pair of badasses. I mean, you two looked incredible. It's almost incredible when you see how well you two matched up together. Like these like two brothers of destruction, let's be honest, to steal the name of another tag team, who you'll have some dealings with. It's incredible it took so long, actually, for you two to be paired up, because when it works so well. Unfortunately, by the time you're paired up, is really when things are really falling apart for WCW. And in that 2000 last year of WCW, where we're seeing, you know, shrinking sets and the lighting being reduced and everything's just starting to feel a lot smaller, and it's becoming quite clear to the audience that this is a company that's struggling financially. You guys are one of the real bright spots in that program, and I actually really enjoyed a lot of 2000 WCW programming. I will say that, like, I think there was some great stuff that went on that show during that time, amongst some of the nonsense. But KroniK was a real consistently bright spot during that period, and it's fascinating to think what could have been, you know, if you two had been paired together just a few years earlier. But you know, the plus side of you obviously being in that era of time is that you get in some really, really good rivalries as part of that. So you get to have this, you know, handicap match with Goldberg, whereby Goldberg is kind of repeating this undefeated streak, new gimmick again. He's kind of, next time he loses, he's out kind of thing. So he's having to be undefeated again. You kind of work in with the Natural Born Thrillers faction, which again I think is a faction that had a lot of potential had it not been for the time, and if I had a bit more time to breathe. You're kind of these, kind of hired muscles. You've got the Harris brothers, who obviously Bryan knows well from.
And we also had
from DOA,
Rey Mysterio, Hoovy, Billy Kidman. So really working with the cruiserweights, which was fantastic. We loved that. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, for you guys who are obviously, you're so strong, but you're both incredibly agile, it must be really satisfying to work against someone like a Juventud Guerrera and to really bounce off them and all the energy they bring.
Yes, because, you know, even though those guys were cruiserweights, they had the ring psychology. They could do the flying around, and we could even both at 6'6", we could fly also. So it just made for really good chemistry. That was a big part of it. So I always had, even with Ray, is, you know, even though we would throw him around and stuff, he was still, you know, the giant versus the smaller guy, boom, 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 and he finally takes him off his feet, you know, the big pop. Just like I said, the psychology of laying that out was always interesting to tell the story, to be a storyteller in the ring. So that's we enjoyed that.
I gotta say that I wasn't really following the WCW product that much, but KroniK was a team that kind of got my attention in those times. I was like, man, these two big badasses. I mean, you know, and obviously the way you guys were working with the cruiserweights and stuff like that. So whenever I was able to catch, and then later on when you guys came to WWF, WWE now, and then you were going up against the Brother of Destructions, I thought that was like a great kind of feud that we could have done more with, I thought. So yeah, KroniK was one thing in WCW at the time that I followed, and I think that was a great team.
Yeah, and before we get to the invasion, comparisons were thrown around at the time between you guys being these kind of muscle for hire and what was happening in the WWF with Farouk and Bradshaw with the APA. Did you guys recognize that at the time? Was that ever mentioned to you creatively, or were you just not watching the other product?
No. They watched our product. We watched their product. No doubt about that. We never really heard those comparisons until way after we were retired. After we were, you know, it was never brought up to us like, hey, you guys look like these guys, or, you know, that kind of thing. We never thought that.
Well, that's the thing. You don't look like them, do you? It's just the same concept. But that's kind of the concept since the dawn of time, to have a bodyguard and to pay for the muscle.
Yeah.
And we were high flying. We would do all the aerial attacks. We would, you know, we didn't just beat guys up. You know, we weren't like the guys that were in the barroom brawl kind of thing.
Well, saying that, I mean, you said Bryan used to love playing cards, so I don't know if APA heard about that. And they were always playing cards. And
no. Yeah, I see your tie in there. But this was before the video games were in the locker room. This was way before that. So everybody, both companies would play cards. There was card players on both sides. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
So there's no skirting around it. Let's get to it. The WWF 2001. KroniK joins. What happened?
Poor planning, poor booking, no long-term vision, no bigger goals for a WCW championship team to come into a WWE team and not do anything with them. Not letting us knock the rust off before we're getting in there. My suggestion to the agents at the time, Pat Patterson being one, hey, why not we get a couple of weeks on the road, knock off the rust, get used to the rings again, bigger rings. Injuries. Kane had a huge staph infection. He wasn't healthy. There was a lot of different things. I'm not putting the blame on anybody. I'm just telling you, if it would have been laid out properly, it could have been laid out perfectly. And if they didn't want it to work, it's not going to work. Just a lot of different things. So I'm just thankful that we were able to regroup and go back and win the All Japan Championships and go out on a winning note to be 3-time world champions. That was a huge thing, in my opinion. I know Bryan was very proud of that. He was the one, he was very instrumental in putting that All Japan deal together for us to go back. And I know he was very, very proud of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that you got that. I mean, KroniK in the WWF is one of those great what ifs of that period, but there are so many what ifs from that attitude, from the invasion period. I think it's just one of the more infamous because you guys took a lot of slack for that Unforgiven 2001 match, and it takes 4 people to have a tag team match like that. And I think there was a lot of very odd booking during that time. It's just curious, given how friendly Bryan and Taker were, that it kind of it wasn't designed to succeed. And I just wonder whether it's an element of, even though you've been WWF guys, you've both defected and you come in as WCW guys. And it felt like anyone who had got over in any way, shape or form with WCW was destined for failure during that time.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It would have been nice to, like you said, see what if, but I don't look back with regret on it. Like I said, I looked at it as a way for us to go out as champions in going, our next step to All Japan. So that's sort of the way I look at it. And I couldn't have picked a better person to have as my partner for 3 world championships. I couldn't have picked a better guy.
Well, before we wrap up, tell me about that time in Japan then. So, that's a huge deal to go to Japan to compete for All Japan Pro Wrestling, to become the World Tag Team Championships. That is a huge nod for you guys, isn't it? That must have felt so validating, especially after what you'd experienced in the WWF.
I think that's the key word there, is validated. After, we had finished up in WWE, to be able to go over there and like I said, Bryan was a big part of that, getting in touch with, I think, Steve Williams, and they were corresponding. And then, of course, with Great Muta, getting us an opportunity there. And then they, as a company, would see the value in us as tag champions. And for me, I actually put the meltdown on Muta to cover him and for the championship. So, it was it was definitely the cherry on the top, so to speak. And Bryan was just a great partner throughout our entire run.
And tell me about that final match you had. His farewell match in January 2003. I mean, going into that match at the Tokyo Dome, did he know that he was done? I know that I knew I was done. I felt he probably was getting close to that time, but I also know he had outside interests, and some of that was actually boxing. He wanted to do some boxing. And with me, I'd had a back injury and a neck injury, and so I knew. I'm so glad that I retired when I did. I didn't want to be that guy that was still, I think I was 39 when I retired. And so I knew that I said, okay, 40, that's it. And so I'm so. You still look 39 as well, Bryan.
All smoke and mirrors, brother.
You still look like my Hasbro. There you are.
Yeah. I was glad I retired when I did, and like I said, Bryan had outside interests as far as like the boxing, and but then he had a shoulder injury, and he ended up retiring soon after that.
Yeah, I read that he was going to have a boxing match in 2002 with Randy Savage in his corner in Vegas, and then that got pulled at the last minute. So that's just before you. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, he blew his shoulder out, and I think that we never did, work anymore after that. So yeah, it was sort of meant to be, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and this show, it's worth saying, these are tribute episodes. He's gone too soon, but we try not to really to dwell on the sad endings that talents face, because as fans we're just sad to have lost them. But obviously, it's 4 years after your last match that Bryan passes away in August 2007. I mean, that just must have been such a huge shock to you. 43 years old, that must have been, really.
Yeah, because even though we had retired, we still talked. We would call each other every week or so, or just touch base, and so we always stayed in touch. And I was here in Arizona, and I remember I got the call, and I didn't get the call from his family. There was a girl that was running our fan club, and she was the one that told me. I just was in shock, just shock. I couldn't believe it, and heartbreaking, man. Just miserable, heartbreaking loss. But my best friend that I'd ever had in the business was gone, and a guy that I could always talk to about anything. And I've had a lot of friends in the business, but no one that I would either let get that close to me, and so yeah, man, it was a terrible loss. So now I do things to celebrate Bryan, and I always keep him in my memory. If you look right up here, you see us, all our championships. I mean, he's with me every show I do, every interview I do. He's always with me. He's always over my shoulder, and it's always nothing. He's always with me, man. I'll tell you.
I think that's clear. You couldn't have asked for a better friend than you. I mean, with everything you're doing online in your appearances and with the meltdown, KroniK is very much living on. And our friends, when we lose them, they never leave us. They always walk alongside us, the people we love. And it's clearly there's a lot of love between you two. And very grateful that we've been able to do this. When Ash and I were kind of looking at people we wanted to have gone too soon, Crush was right at the top of the list. And I said, I've got to give Big Bryan a call and see if he'll join me, because we know him as fans. You knew him as Bryan, and I wanted this to be really about you, not us tonight.
Well, when you asked me about it, I was absolutely, if there's a way to celebrate his memory and all the great things he did in this business, and then to let the fans know what just a wonderful person he was. So he wasn't just the larger than life character in the ring. He was just a sweetheart of a guy and a wonderful friend, and he's truly missed every day.
Absolutely. Bryan Crush Adams, gone too soon, without a doubt.
Definitely missed.
Well, Bryan, before we wrap up, how can my good audience connect with you, and especially keep in touch with what you're doing with The Meltdown, if anyone hasn't connected with you yet? Because you, as I said at the start, you've been killing it. You are having superstar guest after superstar guest. I have absolutely no doubt that if Bryan were still here, he would have been guest number one. But you have been hitting up your little black book of contacts, haven't you, my friend, and getting everyone on?
Well, I'm calling in some favors. There's no doubt about it. The Meltdown, Real Bryan Clark on YouTube. I have a great co-host and Tom, and we have great chemistry, and it's just been working out really well. It seems like everybody that's watching the show is subscribing, so our numbers are going up, and we're just, and the best thing, it's work. And like I said, we talked about that. It is work, no doubt, between the booking, the writing of the shows, the making the calls, getting the appointments, getting everything on track, making sure that your guests show up. There's a ton to it, but it's so much fun because I'm one of those guys that, I love the creative process. I like to see, I put in the work, that's fine. But my thing is, okay, let me see the finished product. I love to see the finish. So I'm ready to watch the show after it's been completed.
Yeah.
And so I get the biggest kick out of that. And so and with Tom is so very creative in that he adds the game show aspect of it. So that's fun. That's really catching on.
Yeah.
With the Mount Rushmores, and Winter Stays On, where we have a different and with each, for example, some of the people we've had, Mr. Anderson's, and it's not just legends. We have current superstars, Brian Cage, AEW, and we're getting more and more. So it's a blend of, and we're also looking at some MMA legends coming up real soon. Stay tuned. But it's just been fun, and like I said, the whole creative process, I love that part of it. And again, Tom makes it work, and we're just going to keep pushing, man. As long as we're having fun with it, and and all of our viewers are happy with it, then we're happy with it.
Well, I'll drop comments in the show notes here. Do check out the Meltdown. I love it. As you say, it's fun. It's energetic. Awesome. Great guests every week. I love the chemistry between you two. And speaking of chemistry, thank you, the People's Broker, for joining me once more today. Usually you talk a lot more. Today, we've let Bryan do the talking. But as always, plug away, my friend, for where we can connect with you on the social media world.
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch with the People's Broker, YouTube is the place. I've been building that channel to educate people, so go check that out, the People's Broker. And also you can connect with me at the People's Broker at all social media. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Yeah, give that a subscribe, guys. Thank you.
And final thanks, as always, Jeff Easton, Too Late Productions, someone you know very well, Bryan, someone I know even better. Always does a beautiful job. And as I say, I always love this finished product. I love what Jeff will do with the edit for this today. So that'll be wonderful. But thank you for everyone for sticking with us today. Thank you, Bryan, most of all, for joining us and sharing memories. And thank you to my great audience for being here for another Gone Too Soon. We'll be back very soon. This has been Wrestling Life. I've been Ben Veal. Real talk from real talent. See you soon.
I've been the People's Broker. See you later. Next time.
See you guys.